So I was sitting outside eating something just ordinary, nothing special, nothing exotic, just a simple meal, some street food, watching people go by. And I felt generally content. I'm not excited, not stimulated, not entertained, but really, truly content. And I realized I couldn't really remember the last time I felt that way back home. And it's not because my life back home is bad, but because I think somewhere along the way I stopped being able to feel something that quiet, peaceful, genuinely at ease. And what I really started noticing, what kind of sunk into me is here I am in what a lot of people call the third world country. That's basically, well, developing country, okay? And if you would compare a checklist between the two, you've got North America, if you've got developing countries, oh, you've got this, you've got much better, subways, you've got transportation, you've got better medical, you've got infrastructure, you've got high-speed internet, you've got modern technology, you get the picture. And yet here I am, for a lack of better words, nothing's perfect. And I'm feeling like it is perfect. I'm in a very simple location here, nothing extravagant, like I said. Just, the more I reflect on it and was sitting there and realizing, I can breathe. I can take a deep breath and just breathe. And at that moment, you're not comparing. And I've never been one to keep up with the Joneses. That's not the point. But you're just not comparing. You're not comparing anything. You're just literally actually enjoying the moment. And that in itself is more than enough. And then I started thinking, why am I feeling this way? What is it? Is it the culture? Is it the people? Because they are extremely friendly, okay? And they're going to feel so welcome. So that is definitely an aspect. Is it just the weather? Is it overwhelmingly the beautiful beaches? Or is it a little bit more deeper than that as well? And I started wondering, when did I stop being able to just sit somewhere and feel okay about it? And I guess more importantly, when did ordinary stop being enough? And now I question, because I was very motivated, in the sense of being financially motivated. I want to get ahead. I want to have my nest egg. And I don't want to stray too far from that, because I figure the more you have, the better of a comfortable lifestyle you can afford to have, of course. And I see the extreme value here that, yes, the dollar goes further, but what does that actually buy you? And how does that help your lifestyle? Because you can make bad choices no matter where you are. That has nothing to do with the country you're in, the environment you're in. You can make bad choices wherever you are. That's a given fact. So how come it's so significantly different here versus North America, for example? And maybe it's what we've been trained, to mistake what's happiness. I think there's a very distinct difference between stimulation and satisfaction. You got stimulation, screen time, choices, noise, novelties, upgrades, events. The brain, it keeps going. And thinking that this is the key to the happiness, because we see it all around us. And then the problem is stimulation fades, and it fades pretty fast. And then, of course, you need more of it and more, and gradually anything that doesn't stimulate you right away, it feels like a problem to solve. And stillness feels like a burden, simply feels like you're missing out. And this particular afternoon, it felt like this is completely perfect. So I ponder a lot on the finances of it. Is it because I think this is really important that we struggle with, because we all want to make sure we're going to be safety, comfortable. And we assume that we need this endless amount of money to do so. But I would also ask yourself, have you ever moved the goalpost? You've got these things you're saving up for, you're doing, and then by the time you get there, you want something bigger and grander. This is human nature. Totally get it. Totally understand it. We've been so thoroughly trained to consume experiences, to seek out the next thing worth, feeling. I think that we've quietly lost the ability to feel the things that we were always, right in front of us. And it's an easy loop to get into. And I'm talking from personal experience, because I never felt as a materialistic type of person. But you kind of get to the point you're overworked, you're on a time schedule, you're next, and then you want to reward yourself when you get your paycheck. You want to buy something for yourself for all the hard work that you've done. Well, that's going to be an endless loop, because it just continues. And then you tell yourself, okay, well, I'll settle down. I'll be a lot happier when I achieve this or when I have this. And it's not, again, it's not about being materialistic. You just think it's almost a pattern, and that is self-enforced. But you never give yourself that opportunity to step away and start enjoying the simple moments. Now I hit a point in my life several years back where I realized I could not continue on. I actually was having some health issues and so on and so forth. And I decided, okay, I got to make a clear choice. And I'll be really honest. At the time, I took it as a huge sacrifice. I took it as a loss. And I was losing out because I had a good income. I had some good bonuses that I was foregoing. And I stepped away from that. And it was quite some time before I started realizing what I've actually gained and not what I lost. And this is what I like to share, because I realized that, you know, if somebody were telling me this during those times and even earlier to those times, you know, you can do this, you can achieve it, you can get there, you know, you don't need so much money and all this kind of stuff. It'll be all comfortable and it's safe. I would have like, no way, not a chance, not yet. There's no way I'm ready. There's no way I can make this switch. There's no way I can actually be comfortable and be safe and protected all the way. It's impossible. I got to do this all the way through. So I was kind of put in a difficult spot that turned out to be a really good blessing. To be quite honest, the noise got louder, the pace got faster, and the quiet satisfaction that used to be enough gradually without anything noticing it just completely stopped, like it was just not enough. So I made a choice and I thought, you know what, I've always wanted to go to the Philippines. I will say that. My plan was to do it when I retire. So I always had that in the back of my mind. I thought, okay, I'm going to go check this out. And I also thought I would go directly there and kind of retire there right away because I'm going to be retirement age. So I started going back and forth and seeing actually what it's all about. And one of the first things I noticed, of course, is how far my dollar goes. I mean, there's a lot of other things. Yeah, the culture, the weather, the people, those are all fantastic things. And those are very important, yes, for a proper happy lifestyle. Don't get me wrong. But what I started really noticing is just which I'm coming back to the money part of it, is because how far my dollar went, is it gives you that choice and thinking, okay, I can afford to do these things and step back for a moment and enjoy them. And I'm not talking fabulous, like living like a king, you know, come here on $100 and live like a king. I'm keeping everything grounded and realistic. And that's not even the point, because I don't think you need to live like a king to be happy. I truly don't. What I'm more after and what I find is the rewarding, peaceful moments of a simple, happy day. You know, when I can find an apartment there that's fully furnished with internet and a pool up in the mountains with fresh air, okay, and I'm finding this for, you know, about $300 Canadian, which is just a fraction over a fancy hotel in Vancouver. I'm paying this for one night. I'm paying this for a whole month. Okay, it really opens the doors, you know, and then from that place, being able to simply go for a 15, 20-minute drive, and I'm going to a local marine refuge where it's all protected, and you're paying a 50 pesos, which is like $1.50 or something like that, entrance fee, and you're snorkeling with the wildlife there. That is fabulous. You can really step back and say, okay, this is value in life. And value, again, sadly, comes down to money. How much money does it take to buy yourself the happiness to some degree? And even though it's a very bad terminology, but yet reality is we want to live comfortable. And I will say, this is one thing I have to say about the Filipinos themselves as well. They've taught me a lot, because they're living far below, like, you know, compared to North America for their income levels and stuff like that. And the stress level there, like if anybody were to trade spots, they would be, the minute you meet them, they'd be complaining, oh, this. And that's completely the opposite there. They're willing to share it even when they have a limited income. So all these things really did help put a lot of things in perspective for myself. I can't honestly think the last time I really had a slow breakfast, you know, in Canada, North America anyway. I've traveled around other places, like where you just really absorb the moment. And I think often if you said this, a lot of people say, oh, I really enjoyed this time going there and going that. And you can bring up scenarios. And I would argue that is probably completely true. However, the difference I find in comparison was when it's a better, healthier breakfast, if you will, in a tropical area a lot less, a lot cheaper, around a culture that's a lot happier, you really absorb that inner peace. And you truly can appreciate having something with no agenda. And you feel the difference, that weight again being lifted off. And these are things that made me really start pondering. Like, it's like coming back from that simple little having just simple street foods to feeling so content, to why am I feeling so content? Yes, a big part of it is financial. I won't, that's definitely a part of it. And I will be sharing a lot of those things in upcoming videos, the actual costs and stuff like that as well. But the important part is you can step outside of that mindset of go, and realize, you know what, there's other choices in life a person can make and do to obtain your inner peace. And again, I'm going to stress, it doesn't necessarily have to be the Philippines. It can be, there's a lot of other choices. I mean, even in my country, for example, there are places that I can find real estate extremely cheap still. It's far out. But so if I'm adamant about being in that particular culture or country, there's always ways. So it's not that I'm pushing any direction in the sense you have to be there to find it. What I am suggesting is you can make your own environment fit your needs, and you don't have to assume you got to stay in this rat race to get your happiness, because the goalpost keeps moving. And yes, when people talk about going abroad to the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, all this kind of stuff, there's an exotic, beautiful tinge to it. But the point I'm trying to make is it's also the ordinary felt something real again. That's the most valuable. Nothing about these moments would make a highlight reel. Nothing would make, would perform like a well content. And like they're a lot more satisfying in a way. They're a lot bigger and louder than more expensive experiences just haven't been able to been available for a long time. And that gap, that gap between what's supposed to feel good and what actually does is worth paying attention to. And here's the thing I think actually is going on. And it took me some time to, go back and forth with my thoughts and trying to figure out and analyze it, because I do like to analyze things and pick them apart. When the noise drops and the pace slows down and you're surrounded by positive energy, there's nothing demanding your attention. It just has room to show up. And when it does, it feels almost shockingly simple. And it is simple, but the payoffs and the rewards are far greater than anything you can imagine. Happiness, it turns out, is not really that complicated. But, for most of us living it, it's just really too loud to even hear it. And that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. There's definitely a consumption trap. The idea that more, bigger, newer is better. And what I'm saying is, when I do go to the Philippines, I'm not limiting myself in the Philippines to buying stuff. I still go. I actually have more dinners there. I go out a lot more. I do a lot more touristy stuff, like the waterfalls, the hot springs, exploring the nature, driving around, looking at finding the zoos and specialties, coffee shops and stuff like that. So I'm not saying you've got to isolate yourself at all. It's just I'm not chasing it, and I don't feel the overwhelming pressure. I don't feel like I'm being left behind. And that's a huge difference. Like sitting on a very simple plastic chair, eating something very simple in the Philippines. And I just think to myself, if this was the same surrounding, not surrounding, but if it was sort of the same style in North America, people go like, who's going to go there? It's got to be this. They have this unwritten rule of what it's supposed to be for you to enjoy, for you to be happy, for you to engage with it. The things that make me feel most like myself weren't the most remarkable ones, but they're the ones that are slow enough to actually feel. And I think this is really important. It's easy to feel this and find this in an environment that's built around slowness. And it's much harder to maintain in an environment that's built for speed and production. And I do notice this every time I return, how quickly the old patterns return within days, if not, if not shorter sometimes. But definitely within a few weeks for sure. And I wouldn't say it's a failure of willpower, because I'm really trying to understand it. I would say I truly think it's the environment that is, that I'm back into, that just starts shifting you. But it just, your body just reacts to the environment you're in. Like knowing this and living it are two different things for sure. And one of the things I keep wanting to stress is It's not as scary or difficult to start making transitions in your life that you can start reaching and obtaining these type of lifestyle if you truly are wanting it, if you truly feel overwhelmed, if you feel like you're suffocating and don't know why. These are all things that are so natural and common in the developing world. And lately it's been getting harder and harder. Things to be seems way more out of touch. It seems to be way harder to get ahead. It seems to be like we're never going to get that peace of mind. And I'm here to tell you that it is not that difficult. It's a scary, you know what the scariest step is? The very first step. That's the scariest step. And, if you want to reach out and ask some questions, like literally how things, if you're at that stage now, you've been planning to do a shift and all this kind of stuff, and you're really hesitant about certain steps, by all means, leave them down. I'm going to do my best to answer them, at least give you the direction that what has helped me or what I failed in, which doesn't help me, but it can help you. Because again, I've said this a few times, there's a big difference between a life that feels full and a life that just feels busy. And once you know that difference, you can't unknow it. And there is definitely a distinction between, the income level and then the cost of living. There's the weather, there's the culture, there's foods, there's a whole bunch of things that do make me personally choose going to Asia. And then, of course, the Philippines is my destination. And there's practical reasons. There's the visa thing, there's the language, there's a whole bunch of things that actually I find that, made me lean towards that way. And initially it was just to get away and just to, I always wanted to go. And like I said, the response that I've gotten from myself, seeing actually the rewarding part of letting go and the job value or the income value that you have here in North America has far less value. There's no pleasure. There's not the same pleasure at all. I mean, what made it really register was not necessarily the Philippines in particular. It was the peace and quiet, the pace, the abundance of that background pressure, that noise, how to be somewhere, how to do something more, something that I always kind of felt out of reach just slightly. And like I say, the goalpost always changes and always moves. And it's difficult to maintain anything like that. I would argue contentment doesn't need much. It just needs room to breathe a little bit, to relax, to step back. That little silent moment of a breath is worth its weight in gold. The question I've been kind of sitting with, and maybe it's worth sitting with for yourself as well, how much of what you're reaching for is actually something you want? And how much of it is just filling space where the quiet used to be? I don't think it's an answer, I don't think it's a question you can answer quickly. But I do think it's one worth really looking at and slowing down to understand. My biggest takeaway in all of this kind of stuff is I want you to realize it is not overwhelming. I mean, it's going to feel overwhelming. It's going to feel scary. But there's many shifts a person can make. You don't necessarily have to stay in the circle of repetitive of noise and can't get ahead and trying to find that peace and quiet and trying to find your inner happiness. It's always scary to go out of your comfort zone. Even though I'm talking about it like it's not comfortable, this pressure is of course not comfortable, but we have this illusion that it is our comfort zone because we're just familiar with it. That's a huge difference. And that's not comfort, that is familiarity, and our brains are tricking us thinking that we can't step outside of that. And I think if you've actually ever been pondering those things and you've been asking yourself, then this is definitely the channel for you, because I will be going more, I'll be helping others, especially if you ask questions, what direction that you need for yourself to look at financially and so on and so forth. Another thing, food, our simple food, the quality of our food, how much chemicals it's got in it versus it does. That's another huge thing I find in the Philippines, for example. Far better. I mean, I used to think when I first got there that they were giving me the bad stuff because it would go rotten so fast. Well, that's because there's no preservatives in it. This is another thing for your mind shift as well. It's extremely healthy to have pure good foods in your body, right? So there's a lot of things to that. Like, here's a really good example when we talk about funding. So beef in the Philippines often is very tough. So there's one place I found that imports it from Brazil. Odds are it's grass-fed, but it does not label it as grass-fed. However, it is imported from Brazil. So beef tenderloin being one of the more expensive cuts of the meat, I can get there in the Philippines for about 1,000 pesos a kilo, so 2 point some pounds. Here in my country, I just asked one local butcher shop how much beef tenderloin was. It was $60 a pound, okay? So, put that in perspective, how many more hours you have to work, or how, if you want to treat yourself to a very tender steak, how much is that going to cost you? For $25 roughly, I can buy 2 point some pounds. It's going to cost me $60 for 1 pound here. So yeah, I don't lose sight of the fact that money matters. I don't lose sight of that at all, right? But what I do focus on is that balance. Follow your own moral compass. Part of the reason why my channel is called My Compass is simply because those things are important to me, and I want to be able to share that with you as well, my experiences and my mistakes, so you don't make them, right? And by shifting that mindset of how much do I actually really need? How many years can I shave off? There might be a lot of people who are saying, okay, I have to work. They've got new incentives to work till you're 70 some years old. They want you to retire, right? And they want you to keep working and so forth. Well, I mean, for some people, it's okay. Maybe they really enjoy that work. They enjoy that socializing, all that kind of stuff. But I think for the most part, most people are in it because they can't afford not to. They want to get these specialty little things. They want to be able to have a comfortable life. But when you're working 99% of the time so that you can have 1% of a comfortable life, when you finally get that 1%, you overspend on stuff you don't need. And this is a really important factor. Like I'm telling you, work, have it set up in such a way that you don't need to. Bring your costs down, live in an area that you can have this quiet and peacefulness. You can step away from the noise. You truly can. And it's not as difficult as you may think. Anyway, I appreciate everybody's following along and appreciate the comments and the follows. I do like engaging in these videos and helping along. So by all means, drop me a line, and everybody take care and see you in the next one.